All right. Hello, everyone. Paul Westman, and I'm here to do another series setting breakdown. This week, I'm going to be talking about a series from one of my favorite authors, although not my favorite series of his, nor his most popular. Talking about the Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher. Right. Let's get started. This is a fantasy series. Is be more considered high fantasy. It is only 6 books long, so fairly short for most of the series that I do on here. And it is a finished series, although in interviews, Jim Butcher has stated directly that he is willing to write other stories set in this world. He just doesn't really have the time to do it right now because he has other series he's been writing on and focusing on. In this setting, it is set in considered more ancient times, kind of equivalent to a lot of like Roman Empire inspired stuff involved in it. Jim Butcher has repeatedly stated that this series did use as one of the tropes sort of the lost Roman legion. As for the location, it is set in a separate world. The world is called Alera. It is a completely fantastical place. And one of the most important things about it is we have a map. Love maps in books. And here we have a basic layout of the main world, although we only deal with the primary continent of Alera. There are, as you can see, we do have others plans that are kind of off to the side, but we never really focus on those throughout the series. There are a lot of cities, and these cities, they are sort of like the regional capitals, but they all answer to the capital city of Alera Imperia. Now, there's a few main races of beings in this world. First, we have the Alerans. Those are your standard humans. Now, what makes Alerans kind of special in the world is they are capable of using something called Furycraft. That is their primary form of magic. We'll get into that more later. Then we have the Marat. The Marat are very human-like, although they tend to be a bit taller. They're also said to have white hair. And the kind of magic that they use is much different from the others in that they don't have any direct like evocation type of magic or manipulation type of magic. Instead, what their magic is they bond with an animal companion, and after that happens, oftentimes the Marat will take on certain physical characteristics. For instance, the ones that bond with horses, they can run faster, they're a bit taller. Several other distinct features for all the Marat is they are able to see in the dark much better than your standard Aleran. And a very interesting cultural aspect of the Marat is that they do not lie. The very concept of lying or saying something that is not true is a completely foreign concept to them. Next, we have the Canaan. Canim are very, I would say the best description is bipedal wolves. They are tend to be much larger, more imposing, and more physically powerful than your other races. Uh, they do have certain wolf-like characteristics, such as their heads are basically wolf heads, and they're often depicted with uh, stereotypical wolf or stereotypical werewolf personality traits and cultures and customs. They are capable of using blood magic, which is a very unique type of magic within the entire realm of Alera, as it is not based upon Furycraft or access to Furies at all. However, it is never really described as to how the blood magic works, where it comes from, whether it's a genetic trait that is passed along, or whether it's something anybody can learn. So, then we have the Vord. Vord are kind of a different sort of alien race. It is even referenced that they may very well even be extraterrestrial. But Vord are very special. They've been kept in hibernation for majority of the history of Alera, but they become awakened very early on in the series. Now, the Vord, they are a hive mind, and the only members of the race that even possess a will to act on their own are the queens. Everything else is subservient to the queens and don't actually have the ability to act on their own. Now, as with insects or others in the hive mentality, one of their key features is that they are able to reproduce at an incredibly high rate, and that causes that is a cause of much of the plot of the later books in the series. Another key feature is that they don't stick to a single form, but rather a lot of the warriors that are sent out to battle, they are adapted specifically to fight the enemies that they are facing. So, next group we have are the Icemen. Not too much is known about them. They live in the north above the shield wall that the Alerans built to keep the Icemen out specifically. There's been much conflict between the Icemen and the Alerans throughout all of the known history of that we're told about. Icemen are special in that they are capable of wielding water furies, although it is not specifically mentioned like if their bond with the Furies is the same as the Alerans. Now, the Furies themselves are sort of a special case that the mini Furies are not necessarily described as having a will of their own, and they are spirits of the world, pretty much. Like everything has a spirit, and it is the bonding of the Alerans to the Furies that gives them access to magic. But some Furies are powerful enough that they sort of are able to manifest themselves in a unique form. Some of them are given names. So all Furies in this world have one of 6 elemental natures about them. So we'll discuss more about that when I talk about the magic specifically. Like I said, the more powerful the Fury is, the more manifestation they have, with some even developing wills of their own. And the most powerful ones are oftentimes ones that cannot be really reasoned with or controlled. So, all right. As for the magic itself, the primary magic that we directly deal with is Furycraft, because the main character in the story is Aleren, and that is the only magic that they are capable of. Now, what happens is Alerens, usually in their youth, they either bond with a distinct Fury, or they're able to just interact with less distinct Furies. Oftentimes, although there is some theories presented in the story that bonding with a distinct Fury that's capable of manifesting itself is actually less useful than just innate bond with just generalized Furies of an element, and that the manifested Furies will actually might clash with the Aleren's will, which can cause some mild disruption, but there is no evidence of that shown. So, all right, now Furycraft typically has both an external and internal use with each element, and each element has a very specific ability about it. Now, like I said before, there are 6 elemental types for each Furies. First, there's fire. Now, for the external use, it is obviously being able to produce and control fires. However, for internal use, it has the ability to manipulate emotions. Sometimes people are able to do that without even being detected. So then we have Earth. Earth provides increased physical strength in addition to its control of the element, and also it allows a person to directly control animals. So allows the overriding of wills, but only for non-sentient beings. Then we have air. The air, you can actually have the ability to fly with it, but internalized manifestation also greatly increases a person's natural speed. For the water, with that ability, the additional ability is the ability to heal others and yourself, and it also gives you empathic senses, so you can directly feel what other people are feeling with direct empathic. With wood, it increases your ability to move throughout the woods, increases your stealth, and it also allows you to be able to track your prey much more easily. And the last element is metal. And with metal, it is increased toughness and the internal manifestation. You can feel pain and use metal crafting to be able to go without sleep. And the most advanced form of metal crafting actually allows you to modify your skin and turn it into a metallic alloy itself. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about other forms of magic. First up, we have the Marat bonding magic. Now, with that, there are they form a symbiotic bond with a creature. Now, I mentioned before that the Murat sometimes takes certain characteristics from the animal, but what happens is the animal that they bond with also gains benefits from the bond. They tend to grow much larger, and they also gain more awareness and intelligence and the ability to understand what they are being told. So it should be noted that which animal the Murat bonds to is not actually a conscious decision. They aren't making the choice to bond with a specific animal that they find. It is oftentimes that they hang around with the animals, and eventually one triggers a bond with them, and that is how the bonding works. Now, what is special about the Murat is that how they organize is actually clan-based, but not based upon family bonds, but instead is based upon what kind of animal they bonded to. So you have horse clans, wool clans. I'll discuss that a little bit more later, but it is a rather unique social organization that they hold. Now, next we're going to talk about the Canon's blood magic. That blood magic is really much more of a softer magic system than the more clearly hard magic system of the Furycraft. Now, it is not used by all Canon per se. It is only actively used by ritualists, which have their own caste in the Canon society. And what is special about this is that the magic is only used through the blood of sentient creatures. So horse blood or dog blood or basic like cow blood that would not be able to conduct the magic. It has to be from like Canem, but it doesn't have to necessarily come from the ritualist. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Canem. Like human blood works a lot, or Alerian blood would work, Murat blood would work, as long as the blood is coming from a sentient creature. So that has led to sort of schism within the ritualists caste itself, where you have traditionalists who believe that the magic should only be used through the use of a ritualist's own blood and having that the self-sacrifice from that blood being used what powers the magic, whereas you have more of a warmongering group who feel that they are superior, the Canon are superior to other races, and therefore other races should be captured and slaughtered for their blood to use to power the magic. Now, one thing the ritualists can do is they can use their blood magic to form something called a blood stone. Now, blood stones are very valuable because they essentially grant immunity to the blood magic. Is why oftentimes you'll see some of the more powerful or more prominent members of like the warrior caste or the leaders will have some form of bloodstone on them to protect them from the ritualist magic. Right. Now the last magic we'll really discuss is the Icemen. I mentioned before they are able to use water crafting through bonds with the water furies. Now we don't really get too much information upon how they can use it or how they interact with the furies, although it is said that they are extremely powerful in their ability to watercraft, although they don't necessarily watercraft specifically as their name suggests. They tend to stick to like ice and snow and forms of crafting like that. Now I'm going to talk about the different castes and clans in the series. That's rather important. There's a lot of social dynamics that is brought into play within this series, and plays a somewhat key role. So first we'll talk about the Alerans. The lowest caste that they have are the slaves. Yes, there is slavery in this series. It is not necessarily seen as a good thing, but it is a thing, and it is participated in by most of the characters. Above the slaves, you have the freemen. Those are your common citizens or your normal countrymen. This is your peasant class, essentially. And then you have what are known as the citizens. These are the most powerful Fury crafters. These are the nobility. They're the leaders. Oftentimes you'll have your the lords and ladies, the rulers of the cities. Above the lords and ladies, you have your high lords who sort of run each individual country, well, not necessarily like county, and all the smaller little villages pay taxes to them. And then above them all, you have the First Lord, who is the ruler of Alera Imperia, and he is also considered the most powerful Fury crafter in this series. Now, there's special terms for the military. The most powerful Fury crafters, or the citizens who join the military, are typically referred to as knights, but they are organized into specifically their primary Fury crafting elements. So, like if the person was the best at air or water, they have special names for it. For air, it is Knight Eris. Earth is Terra. Fire Ignis. Water Aqua. For metal, it is Ferris. And for wood, it is Flora. So those are just special names given to the knights as a sort of they're almost a special forces group within the military, even though all Alerans are said to be able to use some Fury craft. It is only the most powerful ones that are citizens or knights. Next, we're going to talk about the Morant. Like I said before, they are divided up into different clans based upon the animal they bond with. There are 5 different specific animals that they bond with. First, you have the Herdbane clan. Herdbane is said to be a tall ostrich-like bird with powerful legs that often uses a sharp beak that can stab and rip into people, or powerful legs that they can kick with. Next, we have the Gargant clan. That's much larger, almost like a tusked beaver. It is described as only like roughly the size of a hippo or something of that nature. These are much larger beasts. Then you have the Horse clan and the Wolf clan. And while they are mentioned, they're also said to have been killed off. There is a Fox clan, so these are the 5 named clans of Marat. Although in the first book, we mostly only deal with the Herdbane clan and the Gargant clan. Because what happens is the Marat, they tend to have a get-together every once in a while to sort of determine who will lead them. So at the beginning of the series, it is the Herdbane clan who is in charge. Next, we move on to the Canum. The Canum have 3 basic castes that they deal with. There's the warrior caste, who are the physical fighters. They are the defenders and the primary military group within the Canum. Next, we have the ritualist caste. They are the ones that are capable of wielding the blood magic. And lastly, we have the maker caste. Those are your civilians. They're the ones who make things. They're the farmers. They're the hunters. Now, one thing that is never actually brought up in the series is how the castes are formed, or whether members of the Canum can change caste. If a warrior wants to learn how to use the magic, can they change to the ritualist caste, or is it all determined by what caste you were born into? Never really brought up, but it is something to consider. And last group that we'll really talk about with the castes and clans is the Vord. Like I said, they're very insect-like, with a hive mind. Now, the first group that we see are called the Takers. They are much smaller, typically around the size of rats. They are insectoid-like, but what's unique about them is they are capable of like infiltrating and sort of taking over people and turning them into essentially zombies. That is one of the great dangers that the Vord represent. So. Next, we have the warriors. Those are just basically mass-produced, insect-like. There's a lot of variation. Because like I said, they evolve. The Vord evolve depending upon who they're facing to sort of become like maximize the ability to conquer the area. Next group we'll talk about are the queens. There are a few queens mentioned throughout the series, although they are the only ones who are capable of demonstrating will and having the ability to choose for themselves and to decide who's in charge, or decide what the Vord are going to be doing. They're also the source for where the Vord come from, although we don't actually directly see any sort of Vord reproduction. It is implied here and there. Now, the last thing that should be mentioned are the keepers. Because with the Vord, how they spread is they sort of devour the landscape and replace it with a substance called croach. And that is what they sort of think of it almost like a spider's web, only it is a constant, almost snow-covered like slimy substance that covers the ground. Now, walking on it directly doesn't necessarily bring or draw the attention of the Vord, although there is almost like a shell on the surface, and if you break through that shell, that is what alerts the Void to your presence. And with the ground completely covered, it causes some interesting interactions. And it is the keeper's job. They are considered spider-like creatures, but it is their job to basically spread and maintain the croach for. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the history that occurred before the series begins. And a major point of history is the death of the Princeps. Princeps, what is the title given to the son of the First Lord? He's basically the heir to the throne of Alera. His name was Gaius Septimus, and he was killed roughly 15 years prior to the story beginning. And basically what happened was there was an assassination attempt on him, and he managed to survive and to escape, but he was severely wounded. So his father, Gaius Sextus, he sent him off to a fairly quiet corner of the empire, and that was in Caldera, which is where the series begins. But while he was in this area, there was an invasion of the Marat. And the Marat didn't attack immediately, and Septimus did have time to recover before the Marat attacked. But it is during this attack that the Marat invaded, and Septimus ended up dying due to that invasion. So, and with his death, he was the only heir to the throne. And Gaius Sextus is an incredibly old man, and at the beginning of the series, he's in his 80s. So he was not able to produce another heir, and that has led to essentially a quiet war of succession throughout the entire Empire of Alera. So now there is one other bit of history. It is not a direct history, but rather ancient history, and that is the Great Furies. The Great Furies are Furies that are so ancient and powerful that they are literally legends within Alera. And in fact, many of the civilians, the freemen, and even the citizens, they don't actually necessarily believe that they actually exist. But many of them are massive geological and meteorological landmarks. For instance, in Caldera, there is a mountain that is a Great Fury. And a storm is constantly constantly at the peak of this mountain, and that is another Great Fury. Now, like I said, most people within Alera, they actually believe Great Furies to be superstitions, but they still often will use them as expletives. So now, one thing special about the Great Furies is that no one has ever really been able to control them or use them or to bond with them, because they are too wild, too powerful, too unpredictable, and many of them are not would not be considered beneficial to society. So now, one thing special about the Great Furies, there's only around a dozen or so of them, although we don't get to see every single one. But oftentimes, like the High Lord and High Lady of each of the cities, what they will do is they will sort of have a ritual that sort of bonds to the Great Fury, but not in an attempt to control it or direct it or use its power, but instead what it is a sort of a sedative that forces the Great Furies into a sleep, as that is the only thing that the Alerans are capable of doing. So they do this to prevent like earthquakes or volcanoes. All right, now we'll get a little bit into book 1. Do a quick spoiler-free review of it. Book 1 is known as The Furies of Calderon. It starts in Calderon itself, which is one of the easternmost edges of the Alerian Empire, and it borders with the Marat. Now, the primary place we are at is called Bernard Holt, which is basically what happens is the naming conventions of all the cities and farmlands is they are all named after people. So Bernard Holt is essentially the farmlands of Bernard, who is one of the characters we deal with. There's also sort of a fortress set up at the easternmost point on the border with the Marat. That is called Garrison. And we do spend some time in the Marat lands known as Maratea. All right. Now, the main character of the entire series is known as Tavy. He is the nephew of the owner of Bernard Holt, and he's basically a young teenager. He's working as a shepherd, and at the start of the book, basically he's trying to earn some extra money being a shepherd and handling a flock of sheep. That way he can eventually afford to go to the academy. Because what's unique about Tavy in this series is that he, unlike other Alerans, cannot use Fury crafting at all. So he is ridiculed for that often. They call him a freak. But he is said to be incredibly intelligent, and that is why he wants to go to the academy to learn more and be able to use his mind better, rather than, since he doesn't have any sort of Furycraft to fall back on. Other main character we have, often the partner of Tavy later in the series, is Kitai. She is a Marat girl that Tavy meets when he is captured by the Marat after a series of events relatively early on in the book, and basically Tavy meets with Kitai, partners with her for a while, and he learns a lot about the Marat culture throughout his interactions with Kitai and the clan that she's part of. Then we have Isana. Isana is Tavy's aunt. and she is a watercrafter. She is often seen as healing. She works with her brother at Bernard Holt. So she works on the farms, working there, healing animals, and she is basically the matron of the Steadhold there. And we do deal with Bernard a bit as well. He is a wood and earth crafter, so he is retired military, and this is basically where he settled after his military service. It is said he was powerful enough to be a knight, although it is never said that he was a knight in and of itself. And then we have Amara. Amara she is known as a cursor of the crown. Now, what that is sort of like a spy combined with a mail carrier, combined with a general representative of the First Lord. She was originally working with our last main character, Fidelius. She was being mentored by him, but at the beginning of the series, that is when Fidelius, who is much older and more powerful and more connected cursor, we find out that he is part of a plot to overthrow the First Lord, and that is where we get our first bit of conflict. So basically, the initial series is Fidelius working with members of the nobility and certain high lords. His goal is to overthrow the First Lord, because he sees that the First Lord as becoming sort of unfit for ruling, so he's backing someone else to take over. And one of the things that he's doing about this is he's trying to incite a Marat invasion into the land of Caldera, which would allow the High Lord he's backing to sort of come in and save the day of sorts. But then Fidelius and Amara were meeting at that, and when Amara finds out exactly what Fidelius' plan is, she wants no part of it because she is still loyal to the First Lord, and she is a rather powerful aircrafter, so she manages to escape. Now, when she escapes, she ends up running into Tavy, and Tavy is trying to hunt down some sheep that he lost. But Tavy is also on the run because as he was looking for the sheep, he runs into Marat scouts, specifically from the Herdbane clan. So as Tavy is escaping from the Marat, he also runs into Mara. Then he takes her to his home in Bernard Holt. But then Fidelius shows up as part of his sort of scouting of the area, although he is still under disguise, so he's not immediately hostile. But then a small battle ensues, and as Tavy is escaping to try and warn other people about the coming invasion, he is captured by the Marat and taken to Kitai's clan, and she is currently with her father, who is the head of the Gargant clan, and that is when he learns more and more about Marat society and how they operate. So it's a story that has a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different main characters. It's a fairly good story, but there are some issues that I have with it, and that's something that I will get into now. I started doing this when I did my review the other week, and I realized that it's rather important for me to include something like this because otherwise I'm just spouting information rather than giving an opinion about something. So start with some things I don't really like about this series. First off, while the world doesn't completely revolve around the MCs, very little is done off screen. And essentially what I mean by that is we see pretty much almost every sort of key event because those key events only seem to happen directly around our main characters. There are very few exceptions to this, and the reason why I don't really like it is it makes it seem like our main characters are basically the only ones that exist in a massive world. And I find that worlds that are built more with things that don't happen around our main characters seem more alive. So this is one thing. There are some exceptions in the series, but for the most part, every major event that happens is directly around one of our main characters. So that's something that I think could have been improved upon a bit better. Next, an issue I have is that most of the main characters are not overly complex. They are fairly one-dimensional. We have our main protagonist, Tavy. He's the good guy. He does good things. He's always does good things. There is no moral ambiguity about him. And the only time he's ever seen breaking the law is when it's an unjust law in the first place. So he is basically this paragon of morality. And like I said, it tends to get pretty one-dimensional. And the majority of the characters are like that. There's very few characters who has that sort of moral ambiguity, of which one is Fidelius. So he is probably one of the most interestingly written characters in the series. So that is something that I don't necessarily like about the series. It's not a big issue, but it is an issue nonetheless. And I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot of things I don't like about the series, so this is really me kind of nitpicking. Because the last thing I have on the things I don't like is there's very minor formatting issues in the series. Like just going through the first book again for this presentation, just saw a few spots where there was like there wasn't a line break or a change of speaker on something, like very minor issues. Because overall, it's a pretty good series in my opinion. Now, because I like to end on a high note for things that I really enjoyed about the series. First off, there's excellent foreshadowing in this series. There are things that are put forth in book 1 that don't get revealed till book 4, or some things that are set up and don't get too much attention till books 5 or 6. And this just goes on to something that I cannot stress enough. If you want to write a book, that's fine, you write a book. Plan out the book. But if you're wanting to write a series, what you need to do is you need to outline the series. You need to figure out what you want to do with the series as a whole. And that's just as important as just outlining a book. Because many times I've been reading books and the person who wrote it was clearly just trying to write a book, then just trying to write the next book, then trying to write the next book, and what happens is you end up with things that come out of nowhere. That's where you get your like Deus Ex Machinas, or worst part is you get retcons that you need to have done, or bad information. But Jim Butcher is one of the best I've seen when it comes to like plotting out the series in advance, so that way you can seed some things early in the series that really come to fruition later on. And when that happens, it is just so much more satisfying. It is a much better read. And it also encourages people to reread the early books as well. So it is always a good idea. Plan your whole series. Or even if not your whole series, plan enough in the series that you have a general idea of what you want to do or what you can do. Right? Another thing I really like about this series is there is consistency in the magic systems. So, like I said, this also has something to do with planning the series out. You have a well thought out, well organized magic system, and you can adhere to it and keep to it. And just that sort of consistency in the series is something I always personally enjoy. Next, we have steady, measured progress. There's not too many sort of power jumps for main characters. Everything that happens with particularly Tavy, as he is like the main character, it is actual measured progress over time. He gets better through training. We see some of this training. We see everything. It is just logical steps from one to the next as he gets more powerful towards the end of the series. And every step is logical. It's not like some sudden power boost out of nowhere that doesn't really mesh with the entire series. So that is one thing that the series also does very well. Maps. Love maps. I wish every series had maps in it. Yeah, maps just provide such an easy way for people to visualize where things are. This is especially useful in fantasy books, but I've also found it useful in urban fantasy books. Another great use of maps is when I did the Mercedes Thompson series. That generally also includes different maps just to give you an idea, even though that's urban fantasy and it's based upon an actual area. But especially with fantasy, where we can't necessarily research and have a good idea of how things are, maps are excellent always. You can include a map in your story, include the map. I will never be mad at a map. One thing that I did enjoy about this series that I thought was done very well is it demonstrates the flaws of the arrogant, civilized people. And the civilized people were repeatedly shown to be somewhat less how we say, productive than those that they considered barbarians. And they're constantly going to those barbarians for help, to learn things, and to do better. That is something that we definitely need to look at. Western exceptionalism is a problem in this world. I'm not talking about this series, I'm talking about like our world. We need to get out of the mindset of any sort of exceptionalism and to look at other cultures and see what benefits they have. Not just assume that because they are not us, we are better. So this is a series that does that fairly well. And oftentimes the Alerans are shown you have to take the foot out of the mouth because of their arrogance about that. Last thing that I really enjoy about this series, something I like quite well, is that it has more creative and topical expletive usage. This is kind of a small thing, but it's something that I really enjoy because it expands upon like a culture. It also demonstrates that this culture is not our culture. For instance, one of the most common expletives used is crows. And it's even a logical expletive, because oftentimes in these battles, crows are considered like harbingers of death or signs that death has occurred. So to use that as an expletive really makes sense. It is an ill omen. Another use is the Great Furies. They are legendary in this series, and oftentimes they are considered like superstition or myth, and that is built upon in this. So very well done for that as well. So really just brings the culture together, in my opinion. So like I said, there's some things that I didn't really like about the series, but there's a lot of things that I liked quite a bit. Right. Well, that's it for this series. Should be back next week with another series that I'll be doing. It is quite possibly the largest series I've done to date. It is known as the